I don't know if you've come across this thing called nominative determinism. Sounds really fancy, doesn't it? But like all it means is that your name determines who you become in life. Somehow the name that you are given at birth determines your destiny, your vocation, your job, your calling. And so what you are called determines your calling. And like I've come across so many like real life examples of this. And so in the field of weather and meteorology, Sarah Blizzard, what else was she going to be but a weather woman? And then Amy Freeze, Storm Field. It actually makes me want to change my surname to Field so we can call one of our kids Storm Field. What a great name. You know, it's just majestic, isn't it? But then in the field of medicine, Dr. Gross, the dermatologist, Dr. Seawright, the eye specialist, and who else was Joshua Butt going to be but a gastroenterologist? Of course he was going to be. The interweb is just stacked full of examples of this. But let me ask you a question. What if what you were called, what if your identity went something like this? Chosen, redeemed, forgiven, saved by grace, made alive, raised, seated, reconciled, one new humanity, a temple, the very dwelling place of God, a display of God's glory and power in this universe. What if that's what you were called? Well, do you know, that's exactly what Paul's been saying up to this point in Ephesians. That is what you're called. Now, you know, trying to take all of those in one go, it's like sticking your face in front of a fire hydrant and expecting to be able to get it all in, you know, just one of those things. Now, just think about this. Chosen by God. Meditate on what it means to be chosen by God. Like, that's a face full, isn't it? And then you start to stack all of these things up. Redeemed, forgiven, saved by grace, made alive, raised, seated, reconciled. Like, you just can't take it all in. It's huge. Each one on their own is wild, but stacked up. This, if you belong to Jesus, this is what you are called. This is what you are. And so question, you know, if this is what God has called you, what has God called you to? What is your calling? And you know, it matters that we believe this, because belief is the soil from which our behaviors grow. What we believe we are, that's what we become. And so, you know, if this is who we now are, this changes absolutely everything. And so that's where we come to where we're at in Ephesians today. We're starting in Ephesians chapter 4. And so we're just going to read this. And I'm going to read this quite slowly. And I want you to pick out, there's some repetition in this that you really can't miss. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, this is Paul talking, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Do you know, for 3 chapters, this is what we've covered up to this point. So this is kind of like a catch-up for those of you that haven't been around up to this point. The first 3 chapters of Ephesians has basically been Paul laying this foundation of identity. This is what Jesus has done, and in the light of what Jesus has done, this is who you now are. And he's been explaining to this kind of mixed bag of Jews and Gentiles, this is your identity. Remember that once you were dead. You were all dead in your sin. You were far off. You were cut off from God, and you were hostile to each other. Now think about this. You know, if you're dead, what do dead people need? Dead people don't need good advice. They don't need a diet plan. They don't need a health program. Dead people do not need better self-esteem. They need raising from the dead. And that's what Jesus did. And not only has he raised these dead people from the dead, but he has made Jew and Gentile. And in Paul's mind, this is the most hostile division he can come up with in humanity. And he said, now, in Jesus, you've been made alive together into one new humanity in Jesus. This is amazing. Not only that, but he's formed them and us into a temple. And remember that temples are all about God's dwelling place. All the way through the big picture of the Bible is how God comes to dwell with his people. Ultimate dwelling place of God with his people, Jesus. But now God is forming a dwelling place among his people. And so God comes to be among, in, and with his people. And the purpose of this temple is a temple with a mission to show the world who God is and what he's like. And so therefore, this new identity, understanding what we're called, really, really matters. And that's why at the end of chapter 3, Paul rounds up with a prayer for power. And his prayer for power is that they would need power in order to be able to grasp the dimensionless love of God, to be able to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that goes beyond knowing. And the thing is, that kind of love is something that can only be known fully in community. We can't, like, you think about it, right? Trying to grasp I find it hard enough to grasp being loved by one other human. Like, it's amazing. But then to be loved by God, we as one single human cannot grasp what it is to be loved by God. We need everyone else to be able to see how God loves his people. Not only that, but it's a prayer that we would be filled with the fullness of God. Now, it's very easy to say a phrase like filled with the fullness of God and go, just let it trip off your tongue. But let me ask you a question. How full is God? It's an easy question. He's full. Like, he's very full. He lacks nothing. He is complete in himself. And if you were here last weekend, you'd have heard this. And you've heard me say this so many times from the front. God doesn't need anything. He doesn't need us. He doesn't need anything from us. But here's the remarkable thing. He wants us. And he wants us because he loves us. And he loves us because he is love. Not only that, but he delights to share his fullness, his completeness with us. He loves to share his lacking nothingness with us. And all of this talk of fullness, again, is temple language. Again, it's the language you see all the way through the Old Testament. This language of filling, he's filling his temple. And so this is power and this is fullness with purpose. That we would know who we are, that we would know who we are loved by, and that we would display the lover to the world. Now, Paul comes to this kind of tipping point in Ephesians, this pivot point. And he says, if this is who you are, in the light of that now, how do you live? If this is what you are called, what is your calling? And so how does our calling line up with what we're called? Now, this whole series in Ephesians so far has been called A New Way to Walk, because Paul uses the word walk quite a lot. And when he's talking about walk, he's talking about the direction, the trajectory of our lives. What's the kind of the pathway that our lives is taking? Is that bad English? What is the pathway that our lives is? I don't know. You get the point. Anyway, where are we going? That's the whole thing, okay? And so, therefore, if this is our direction, if this is what you're called to, how will you now walk? How will you live in the light of what you're called? And it's really simple on paper. Live like who you are. If you're this temple, if you're this dwelling place of God in the world, live like who you are. And you're not meant to be static. This is a temple on legs. This is a temple that is going places. Now, let me be very clear. Knowing what we're called, knowing what our identity is, it has to come first. If we just dived straight to, right? I did think about how funny this would be, a little thought experiment. What if we'd done a series in Ephesians 4-6 and we'd skipped out the first half, right? Now, the first half lays the foundation. Forget that. You dive straight to chapter 4. There's lots of commands. There's lots of do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, okay? Things like, children, obey your parents. Don't steal. Don't get drunk on wine, for that leads to debauchery. Now, a lot of that, who uses the word debauchery these days? But anyway, all of those seem fairly common sense. But if you just go straight to those and you think it's saying, do this, don't do that, don't do that, you could get the impression that in order to be loved by God, you have to fulfill this set of rules. Does that make sense? And so that's why knowing who you are, knowing this new identity, being firm in what you are called really matters. If you belong to him, let me say this really clearly. You are already eternally known and loved, eternally accepted. You are already in union with Jesus himself. That's wild. That's your reality. And if that's your reality, then live like who you are. And remember that all of this is about being and becoming God's dwelling place. It's a temple with a mission. But I also want to say this really clearly. This temple is made to be one. It's made to be united, together. Unity is the big idea that Paul keeps hammering away at throughout Ephesians. You can't miss it. And so, when I say live like who you are, I'm not talking about me living like who I am in my little bubble and you living like who you are in your little bubble. Whenever we see you in Ephesians, it's always talking about y'all, yous, everyone together. Our new identity is a united identity. And so, at the start of chapter 4, we have eventually arrived at the start of chapter 4. Sorry, that's probably my longest intro in about 10 years. But anyway, here we are at the start of chapter 4, and Paul is laying down some groundwork for how we live out this new united identity together. So, in a nutshell, this is where we're going this morning. Paul wants to show us some new attitudes that maintain this unity. But also, he wants to show us the shared reality that makes this unity possible. So, here we go. This new identity that we have in him, this new calling, comes with a new set of attitudes. And these attitudes maintain unity. Remember, our new calling is that we're this temple, we're this mobile temple, displaying to the world who God is and what he's like. And so therefore, we need to walk in a manner that fits with this, displaying to the nations who our God is. And remember, you don't dive straight to this. You go back to the fire hydrant. You keep getting a face full of that identity. Chosen, loved, reconciled, redeemed, etc., etc. I can't believe I just said etc., etc. when I'm talking about some of the most deep, profound identity truths ever. But given that this is who you now are, your calling, and not just, whenever I talk about unity and the body of Christ, I'm not just talking about what takes place in this building. I'm talking about the body of Christ right across the world and across all time. Given that this is who you now are, your calling is to live out the reality of being a reconciled, spirit-indwelled, Christ-unified people, united to him and united to one another. Now, I don't know what springs to mind for you when you think about living as the dwelling place of God, empowered and filled with his fullness. Kind of powerful, full stuff, right? Yes, but also, and this is where Paul is taking us this morning, is pretty gritty, ordinary, everyday stuff. This is what Paul means when he says, with all of that fullness and power, walk in a manner worthy of your calling. Live like who you are. And this new identity comes with a new set of attitudes. Humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And these are displays of his power and his fullness that actually have power to reshape our ordinary lives, our friendships, our marriages, our workplaces, our homes. But more than that, when we live that out together, it produces something that is literally out of this world. Because it reflects who we're united to. It reflects his kingdom. Now, the Bible Project did a really helpful diagram, which unhelpfully, because our projector is on the way out, you can't see the one thing that I really wanted you to see, which is right in the middle there's a little temple, okay? And that temple is you, okay? So hold that thought in your minds, all right? Now, this shows that this is the age that we now live in, and it's marked by evil and sin, death, slavery, violence, curse. You don't need me to tell you that. Just watch the news tonight, and you will see all of that kind of lived out, okay? But here's the thing. You know, through what Jesus has accomplished on the cross, through his life, his death, his resurrection, and his ascension, and Thursday was Ascension Day, and so, like, happy Ascension Sunday, guys. Like, through his ascension, through what he is currently doing, it means that this life of the age to come, marked by justice and love and life, freedom, shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken, blessing, all of that is leaking in to the present age. And guess who gets to put that kind of leaking in on display? We do. We do. This is what we're called to put this on display, because the church is meant to be a glimpse of the age to come. And you know, that leaking in is marked by attitudes like humility and gentleness, patience, bearing with one another in love, and eagerness to maintain the unity of the Spirit. Because this is what a community of people look like when they've been empowered to grasp the dimensionless love of God and are filled with his fullness. Now, I guess the question is, why did Paul bring these qualities to mind? Well, I think it presupposes something, that life in community, life in this new community of Jesus' people, is going to come with challenges. Even in this room, we are diverse. We're different. We have different ideas about how the world works. We've got different histories, different preferences, different personalities. And I think this one is really important to point out, that none of us, regardless of what we think, have arrived yet at being disciple Poppins, practically perfect in every way. All of us are still works in progress. We are still in process. And so, do you know, you're going to find me being very quick to big up the benefits and the beauty of being in community with people who are not like me. And that's because Paul says so. Paul actually says that it's really important that we're in community with people that are not like us, because when that happens, we put the multicolored wisdom of God on display. We show what God is like when we're with people that are different. But the honest truth is that sometimes people can be pains in the bum, especially when they're not like us, because we just don't get them. Now, moment for honesty here. How many times have you had like a conversation with a brother or sister and you've come away from it thinking, if only they did it my way, because my way is better? I was going to ask for hands up, and then I thought that'd be way too exposing, but I'm quite happy to. And because that's how we think. And so therefore, we can expect that life in community, whilst it is going to be full of joy and learning and opportunities for growth, sometimes it's going to be bumpy. Now, you know, if we consider the opposite of these qualities, pride, harshness, or actually, I think probably better, like manipulation and control, impatience, withdrawal. Do you know what I mean by withdrawal? You know, where you're still with somebody, but actually in heart you've pulled away from them. Division. This thing of, actually, I'm going to do as much as I can to rebuild walls here. You think about what these attitudes do. What do to community? They tear at the fabric of community. They fragment. They destroy. This is the way that this age that we're in does business. But you know, these qualities here, let's just think about them for a moment. Humility. I am not the most important person in the room. Gentleness. I've got my preferences, and I've also got the power to make my preferences come to pass, but I am not going to insist on my own way. I'm going to use the power that I have with tenderness and reserve. Patience. Now, the Old Testament word for this is great. It means long of nostril, which I think for somebody with a nose as big as mine, that's really good news, because it means that you don't get a hot nose fast, you know? You don't reach boiling point fast. You take a long time to kind of heat up and fly off the handle. Bearing with, even when there is friction, I am committed to sticking with you. And then eagerness to maintain the unity of the Spirit. In every relationship, there's an us. And in that us, there's a you and a me. And I will play my part to keep us united. Do you know, all of these qualities, they kind of act like relational shock absorbers. You think about the way that shock absorbers work for cars. I'm glad that I exist in the age of shock absorbers in cars, because like in the early days when they didn't have them, you'd go over a bump and the cars would kind of go like this because there was nothing to absorb the energy of the bump. But those qualities, humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, what they do is they absorb the cost of going over bumps in relationships. And it all flows from the reality that Jesus has made peace with you and me. Therefore, he's made peace between you and me as well. And so therefore, I will absorb cost in relationships for the sake of unity. Now, caveat. This does not mean that people get to behave badly in community and to get away with it, because that tears at the fabric of community. It tears at the fabric of this temple. Neither does it mean put up and shut up in abuse situations. But what it does mean is that, you know, in everyday, ordinary, like I guess the kind of 90% of community life, which isn't those other things, you know, if we pursue these qualities, if we pursue these attitudes that have been made available to us in Jesus, then they work like relational glue. And you think about the kind of community that will be produced. Because essentially, you know, when we think about those qualities, who is it that comes to mind? I was on a walk with Caleb yesterday, and I was saying, you know, when you think about these qualities, who comes to mind? And he said, Alan Griffiths. I said, close, but no cigar. It's Jesus. And the thing is, this is the character of Jesus. Now, I guess, this is dangerous ground. Should I have a theologically freestyle? This has just come to mind. So, you know, in Philippians 2, and I was going to say this bit, but it's the next bit that follows. Oh, this is dangerous ground. Don't burn me if I'm a heretic, okay? In Philippians 2, you can tell that Paul is thinking about these qualities because he's talking about Jesus, and he says, your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he poured himself out, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient, even to the point of death on a cross. The one who was the most important person in the room humbled himself. He had the right to insist on all of his preferences, and yet he submitted himself to what he did. And I'm thinking that Paul has got in mind here the first time that God revealed his character big style to Moses on Mount Sinai, when he said to Moses, this is who I am, the Lord, a God. And get this, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, long of nostrils, ultimate patience. This is what God is like. Slow to anger and abounding, overflowing in steadfast love and faithfulness. Is there someone who is going to bear with us more than him? And so here's what Paul is saying, is that when Jesus is on the cross, when Jesus is going to the cross, this is Jesus actually displaying godness. This is what our God is like. And so these qualities of humility, gentleness, patience, when we display these qualities, we are showing the world what God is like. This is what he's like. And I've completely lost my place in my notes, and so I'm going to have to go back and find my place. Guys, this is what he's like. What a privilege that we get to display this to the world. And this is so different, isn't it, to the way that this world thinks about power and fullness. You know, let's use our imaginations for a second. Two communities that are marked by these sets of attitudes. What do these communities look like? We don't have to use our imaginations much for this, do we? We see it every day. And so clearly, we want this. So why do we find it so hard? I think there are probably two big reasons. The first one is that if we're honest with ourselves, we are still in process, and we do like our own way, and we like to put ourselves first. And by the way, when I say this from the front, I'm not like saying like, and this is all of you, this is what all of you are like. I've got like a mirror there, and like it's a magnification mirror as well. Like I recognize these things. We like to self-defend. We're not always down for the challenge of hanging in there with difficult people. But that's not part of who we are anymore. We've been made different. This is not what we're called to. But I think there's a second reason as well, and we can't ignore this. According to Ephesians, this runs far deeper than just personality clashes. There are these spiritual powers, and these spiritual powers are doing everything that they can to undermine the foundation of this new temple, to put in issues that cause creaks and cracks and crumbles in this new temple. And their most insidious tactic is to take our differences and to make them into wedges instead of us embracing those things as the very things that put the multicolored wisdom of God on display. And so we want to be alert to those tactics. Whenever there's a little voice that says, oh, that person's really annoying, aren't they? Where do you think that voice comes from? That little bit of irritation, where do you think it comes from? We want to be alert to that. Picture the scene. You're in house group with June. By the way, June does not exist. June is not based on a real person, so before any of you go home and start thinking, oh, was I the inspiration for June in that story? No, you weren't, okay? Because I know that some of you with your very sensitive consciences will go out there thinking, I was June. I'm definitely June. No, you're not. You are not June, okay? So, caveat aside, you're in house group with June, and June talks too much. And you avoid June. June. Loved by Jesus, June. Chosen, redeemed, reconciled, June. But work in progress, June. And June grinds your gears. And so you withdraw from June in heart. It's so easily done. And it's often not over like major theological things. It's not over major theological things that unity dies, but it's more often death by 1,000 irritations. And I recognize that even in saying this, in saying that like it's possible for people to grind my gears, like I'm probably June for some of you. Like you probably look at me and think, oh no, here comes June. I wish he'd just go away. At least you got another name for me now. Maybe you can use that as a code name. I don't know. But I guess this is where we want to ask the question. If we feel that rub, if we feel that irritation, then actually we want to come to the Lord and say, actually, Lord, you're doing a work in June's life. How do I get alongside what you're doing in her life and be part of what you're doing? But then I think there's a deeper and I think a more humble question that we need to ask as well. Actually, Lord, what are you exposing in me through this? How are you changing me through my interactions with June? Because when we do this, it isn't merely the pursuit of unity in Jesus, but it's actually a beautiful act of resistance against the powers. These attitudes are vital for unity. But I want to give a big encouragement. We don't have to create unity. It's already there. It's already purchased by the Spirit. And Paul says that these attitudes demonstrate our eagerness to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Do you see that word? Maintain. Right. How many of you are responsible for creating this unity? Keep your hands down, okay? We are responsible for maintaining this unity. And when we come to the Lord saying, I don't have the power to do this, Lord, fill me with your Spirit, empower me so that I become a person of humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another. When we put those qualities into action in community, we participate in maintaining this unity that Christ has purchased and that the Spirit is producing. It's beautiful. That's our part in this. And we do this so that we live in and experience the peace among us that Jesus has made for us. And this is vital for what's going to take place in the rest of Ephesians 4-6. In the rest of chapter 4, Paul's going to talk about the gifts that God gives. Gifts only work well in unity. Maturity only happens in unity. Love is only truly expressed in unity. And Paul is saying here, Christ has torn down ancient walls in his flesh. Work with what Jesus has already won for us, and that the Spirit is working among us. Don't rebuild torn down walls with your preferences and your ego. But the good news is that there is a shared reality that makes this unity possible. Do you know, how many of you have been abroad and seen a bunch of Brits on holiday, like a hunting pack, except what they're hunting for is a fish and chip shop, because they just want something where they can find some pickled eggs. Or I think on a different level, trying to find a church where it's full of people who think and act just like us. But you know, in Christ, what we have runs far deeper than shared culture or preferences. This is a unity that has been purchased by Jesus on the cross. It's now being produced by the Holy Spirit. This is reality. And so we need to know this reality, and we need to live lined up with that. And if you are his, if you belong to him, then this is our reality. So we want to live like who we are. And how does Paul describe this shared foundation of unity? Right, I'm gonna read these verses out again, and can you do me a favor? Can you hold your hands up like this? Okay? Oh, there we go. See, nice one, Bas. Everybody, hands up like this. Every time you hear the word one, can you put a digit up? Okay? So, here we go. There is one body and one spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father who is over all and through all and in all. I think I'm counting right here. How many actually, this would be a challenge, wouldn't it? How many digits have we got up all together? No, just one set of hands. How many have we got? 7. And if you know anything about the Old Testament at all, and Paul being one of the most kind of nerdy Hebrew Bible scholars, you will know that 7 is the number of completeness. It is the number of fullness. And so what is Paul saying here? He's saying that the shared foundation of unity that you have is complete. It lacks nothing. There is nothing that has been provided for us that you need more in order to live united together. It's good news, isn't it? It's good news. And the things that we share, oh, guys, this is the stuff that we share, which runs far deeper than pickled eggs, or whether you like hymns, or like more modern-day choruses, or whatever, or whether you like to drink from one cup or a bunch of shot glasses. You know, this runs far deeper than that. Look at it. And so, what have we got? We've got one body, one people that we all belong to. There's one Spirit who is the life source of it all. There's one hope. That means that we share one future that we're all headed towards. One Lord that we all share in allegiance to. One faith. That means there is one single gospel, one single good news that brings life. There's one baptism. That is, there's only one way to be incorporated into this body. If you haven't been baptized and you want to be baptized, come and chat to me afterwards, because there's only one baptism. And there is one God and Father, the one who is the origin, the source, and the destiny of us all. Oh, guys, do we need anything else to be united to one another? This is what we share. This is what unites us. And yet we're so prone to rebuilding walls. You know, you get a group of people together and you want to decide what you're going to have as a takeaway. Think about the challenge of that. You know, it's like herding cats, isn't it? And yet, what we want to remember is that what unites us is far greater than the differences that potentially divide us, because what unites us is the peacemaking work of Jesus on the cross. We need nothing else to unite us. We need nothing else in common whatsoever. I've mentioned before, but I'm going to mention it again. Monday morning Bible study, age range 18 to 55. Nothing else in common. Well, I mean, 2 of us are genetically related, but apart from that, there's no other kind of, nothing else in common at all, other than we're blokes. And we're all different. We're all very different. And yet, the unity that is there is beautiful. It really is. It's stunning. And do you know why it's beautiful? It's because it's not produced by us. Purchased by Jesus, produced by the Spirit, maintained as we walk in that together. What a privilege. What a joy. Guys, this is so good. What unites us is one body, one Spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father who is over all and through all and in all. And you know, even that language of in all reminds us of the stakes. It's temple language again. God comes to be in his temple. This is a temple with a mission to display the power, the presence, the love of God to the world, and that depends on us as his people walking in the unity that he's given us. This is what you're called to. This is your calling. So live like who you are. This is reality. And very briefly, the flip side to this is that division denies reality. The reality is all that Jesus has purchased for us on the cross. That's reality. Those sevens, that complete unity, that's reality. So when we choose to divide, we're saying that Jesus' work on the cross doesn't work, doesn't function. But actually it goes deeper than that as well. Because division destroys mission. You think about the privilege that we have to put on display who God is and what he's like to the world. He's reconciling all things to himself. And so when we actively choose to divide from brothers and sisters, that distorts this picture of a God who is reconciling all things to himself. And so therefore, living in unity is actually for the sake of the world. And so, as we live humbly, meekly, patiently with one another, as we bear with one another in love, we show the world who God is and what he's like. We show the God of Exodus 34. We show the Jesus of Philippians 2. We display him to the world. And so therefore, we need to keep coming back to these qualities, these attitudes of humility and gentleness and patience, bearing with one another in love. And so what should we do with all of this? I think the first thing, it's not possible for us to love in this Jesus-like way if we've never experienced the love of Jesus in this way. And so if you've never given your life to Jesus, I just want to say that his invitation is open. And because the way that he saves people isn't about what we've done, it's never about earning. We've all walked away. We've all rebelled against God. And what he says is, here's an invitation to come back. I'm king. If you recognize that I'm king and that I do a much better job of running your life than you do, and you turn around and you walk away from all of your rebellion against him and you say, I want you. As soon as you turn around, it doesn't matter how far you've gone, he's right there. He's right there. And the invitation is to come. And so if you feel that this morning, then come and chat to me afterwards. I'll just be over there. Today's the day. But equally, I feel like there are people here who have known his love, but now you feel like you're kind of living on memories. You kind of remember the taste, but it's more like beef jerky than steak to you right now. And he calls you to come. He calls you to not just to remember in your memory, but to have a lived experience. He calls you to come back to this fire hydrant, to drink deeply. And he's not mean in the way that he gives. It's even more than that. It's like standing in front of a 50-foot wave and just letting it wash over you. Those of you that are familiar with hymns, do you know the hymn, "Oh, the deep, deep love of Jesus, vast, unmeasured, boundless, free, rolling as a mighty ocean in its fullness over me"? I mean, you think about that. You ever been knocked over by a wave? This is a much bigger wave. Come to him, drink deeply again. Drink deeply of the love of God and remember what he calls you. He calls you chosen, adopted, redeemed, forgiven, brought near, filled with his Spirit, his. He says, "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I've called you by name. You are mine." And when we know what we're called, then we walk worthy of the calling that he's given us. We begin to live like who we are. Becoming like him doesn't begin with, do more humility. It begins with looking at Jesus. It begins with coming to him. It begins with drinking deeply of him, being marinated in the truth of who you now are in him. Being marinated in the truth of just how signally loved you are. And when you experience his love, what he does is he produces his life in you by his Spirit. Humility isn't generic niceness. It's cross-shaped. He changes us to love like him. And so we look at Jesus, the one who is ultimate humility, the one who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but poured himself out, took the very nature of a servant. He made himself nothing. He was willing to be wronged for the sake of what he was coming to accomplish. He bore with the people that he came to save, and even to the end, he shows us what love looks like at full stretch. And so, this morning, let's ask the Holy Spirit to focus our eyes on Jesus. The more we see him, the more we're made like him. Hi, come on in. Do you guys want to come up? The more we see him, the more we're made like him. The more we gaze on him, the more we become like him. And then we live like who we truly are in the world. And that's for our good, for unity, for the sake of the world, and for his glory. Shall we stand together?